Welcome to the 615 Sessions podcast on this Friday, December the 6th. Happy to have you in for another episode of the pod. We got Zach Lyons back.
Hello.
It's been a while since he's been able to join us, but that's because he's a very busy man now. He has a radio show, he has a Substack, he has a podcast, he's a media mogul at this point in time. Football and Other F Words, cover 2, of course. The website for the Substack is?
StackingTheInbox.com.
There you go. Easy enough. Good to have you back, Bob.
It feels good. Some may call me a Zach of all trades.
No. I'm not going to do that, only because I think you would enjoy it. Do you watch Shrinking? I've asked like 7,000 people this.
I love Shrinking, and it makes me cry almost every episode. Just like
it is. You know what? I didn't know that I could feel real human emotions anymore until I started watching Shrinking. I'll be honest with you. But when the main character's name, Jason Segel.
Yeah. He's the best.
What's the therapist's name?
Man, and we just watched last night's episode.
I did too. Come on.
And maybe you shouldn't watch it when you're coming off of a Christmas party high.
Yeah, it was for some more literal. Jimmy, how he calls his method of therapy jimmying. I feel like that's what you're trying to do with Zach of all trades. I feel like you're trying to get something started there, and I'm not going to let it happen.
So I just like to make sure I get a joke in there that I know that you will absolutely hate.
Well, there's one or two throughout the course of the podcast, certainly. But the Football and Other Efforts podcast is now. I don't think we've done this since you've gotten the radio show or the podcast has been on the Zone. So we're very happy for the success of the podcast and the radio show. It's been really cool to see that all work out. Too bad the football team sucks. Otherwise, this would be a lot more fun for you, I'm sure, because you've worked very, very hard to accomplish all of these things. And now we have 3-9 and just kind of, whatever that thing was last Sunday in Washington. Yeah,
it's kind of weird. I guess my own individual success of Football and Other F Words and then the Stacking the Inbox has all coincided. Like the more popular and successful I have gotten, the least successful the Tennessee Titans have gotten. So obviously everybody can blame me fully for a third in a row losing season by the Tennessee Titans team.
That's very self-involved of you, which means, it warms my heart. It feels like, there's a little bit of me in there. That makes me very happy to hear. Anyway, it's bad. And the coaching staff is something that's come up a lot throughout the course of this, whether Brian Callahan is cut out for this, whether Colt Anderson should be fired now or later, depending on who you ask, though I know you have had special teams discourse on your show and podcast at great length at this point, heading into week 14. So let's start there, because I think everything's on the table at 3-9. My personal feeling is just kind of feeling things out. Could change at any moment. We know how irrational the decision-making can be sometimes, or at least how reactive the decision-making can be sometimes. But right now it feels more front office should be on at least some level of mild alert. And the coaching staff, largely pending some decisions that are probably going to have to be made this offseason, should be good to come back for another year.
Well, it's 2 years to the date of John Robinson being fired midseason, which is wild to think about it because it feels like so much has happened, and really a lot has happened since John Robinson got fired. But
I have aged 10 years in those.
Yes. I feel my age finally, like my age has caught up with me. So I look at it this way, because we just got done talking about this on cover 2 with Blaine and Zach. And it's like, you lose to the Jags at home. I don't know what happens, but something is going to happen, because there's just no way you can lose to this Jaguars team that is obviously worse than you in almost every conceivable manner. And you lose at home to a crowd that's already going to be pretty much empty, devoid of fans in the stands. And you lose to this a backup quarterback and a lame duck head coach. Like, I don't know whose head is going to roll, but someone's head feels like it's going to roll. That could be the Colt Anderson game. We don't know how they actually would lose the game, but like
Colt Anderson game. God,
yeah.
What was the Todd Downing game? Was that Green Bay?
where he got a little tipsy and drove
where
home.
they looked like an actual
Yeah.
NFL offense. And again, they couldn't handle the literal hangover of success at that moment, unlike
Yeah.
this year's football team that considers success 3-9.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's the 3-9 makes the discourse around the coaching staff so much more difficult to navigate because obviously I think we all fell into this trap where we're seeing all the signings happen and we're like, okay, this team's going to be competitive and this team's going to be this and that, even though that like in February they delivered a different message, but obviously actions kind of sometimes dictate what your messaging is now in the present. And so it's like, even if they end up being 6-10, just like they were last year, it's still disappointing, I think, from a standpoint of we believed in so much change and newness, but that also means we kind of underplayed all of this change and newness actually just happened to work. And that in the NFL, that sometimes often doesn't work out, even though there are examples of like the Texans and Commanders in recent history, but more often than not in the NFL, that stuff just rarely works out all at once, especially without a quarterback. And I think that's where the Texans and Commanders differ from the Titans situation is that while Levis has played well, and that is a credit to the coaching staff and to Levis, the start of the year, we're probably talking about a 6-win team and probably a
probably be on
fraudulent
track for what their projected win totals were, right?
Right. And kind of looking at it like this. Remember that 7-5 team from 2022 of Mike Vrabel? I was like, those wins do not matter. They're fraudulent wins. This is a fraudulent team. This team sucks. I would probably be saying the same thing, but at least we would have the excuse of first year head coach. And the 3-9 and this loss and the special teams and all this kind of stuff, like it's just really hard to defend the coaching staff. But I do think as a whole, Denard Wilson, Brian Callahan, the assistant coaches behind them, I do think that, and even Rand Carthon and Chad Brinker, Colt Anderson's more of a debatable thing for me, but I understand the optics and the logic in firing him. But I do think it's all player personnel for the most part. But I do think that at the end of the day, this is a regime and staff that needs to be here in 2025.
Oh yeah. I mean, I for the most part agree. It would really though, I think, hurt the credibility conversation around Brian Callahan if Colt Anderson were retained. And I do completely understand what's happened out there is not directly on Colt Anderson. There's so many miscues across the board, whether it's penalties that take place on the special teams that cause disadvantageous field position for the opponent, or Jaquan Jackson putting the ball on the turf and now the fumble luck has turned and he's no longer recovering them. Now he's just coughing them up. There's a lot of different things there to work through. And, I talked to a couple people about this throughout the course of the week, just the idea, like, I don't know. I'm not famously low football IQ. So that's out there. But my ability to diagnose special teams specifically, I'm not qualified to make those determinations, and I'm aware of that. But I can't accept league worst anything when there have been so many catastrophic incidents that have directly contributed to this team losing by 10 points or more 6 times out of the 9 times that they've lost. They're not like one of these one-score football teams. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like the Chiefs are one of these incredibly lucky one-score football teams, but you make your own luck. Patrick Mahomes is good enough to make your own luck. This team is actively nuked by its special teams, and that it continues to be a thing week after week after week in some form or fashion, sometimes less disastrous than others. I don't think you can keep that person.
The only way you can keep them and justify keeping them is because they have been active making personnel changes.
Yeah.
And if the special teams gets better, then there was your answer of what the issues were at the beginning of the year. But I do agree, like, it becomes to a point where it's an untenable situation. Like you said, like there's credibility issues. There's, it's just the optics of it, right? Now, listen, We saw Mike Vrabel keep Shane Bowen and keep his staff largely intact of having a historically bad defense again on third downs and that kind of situation. So things can, and they got better. They weren't great, sure, but they got better. And things can get better with Colt Anderson. But at the end of the day, and this is not just a worst in the league situation, this is a historically bad special teams. And at the end of you gotta, if that was a defensive coordinator or an offensive coordinator, they'd be shown the door at the end of the year. So it's kind of like the NFL business aspect of it. And if you're looking for a pretty easy scapegoat to in a losing season to buy you some good graces, then yeah, you would be able to easily fire Colt Anderson. I do think that special teams will turn around. And that's probably if Vegas were to put odds on that, would definitely not be in my favor.
At some point, just regress to the mean, even. Yeah. You know? I mean, my God.
And that's all you're really looking for, really. I mean, it's kind of like the offensive line. Like, we were really just looking for an average offensive line. Like, don't be the worst. And they're almost still the worst this year with Bill Callahan, which then you look at Colt Anderson, first-year special teams coordinator. You're like, just don't fumble. Don't allow big plays. You don't have to create an explosive play. You don't screw it up. And as long as if he doesn't just screw it up, then I think that he keeps his job. Because I think when you go and watch the tape like the coaches do, because they'll do their little assessment, their self-reflection, their exit interviews, and when they look at the tape, from everything that we have heard from Brian Callahan to Colt Anderson, from even Nick Holtz and Denard Wilson, there's always the usual coach speak of, well, it's at the end of the day, it's on us. But there's a lot of stuff out there that we're just kind of like piecing together and hearing where it's really just personnel. And that's not really an indictment of Rand Carthon per se, but it's really an indictment of how bad this offense, this whole roster was left in the dust by 3 straight drafts of nothingness by the guy who got fired 2 years ago.
Pour one out for J-Rob, baby.
Yeah.
That, God, just so long ago. But, I mean, there's still, to your point, there's constant reminders of the implications of that when Traylon Burks is put on injured reserve on like October 16th.
And he's the best first-round pick of the last 3 drafts by John Robinson. Think about that for a second.
By far, based on contribution. And the man has played, I mean, to date, about 33% of the offensive snaps and hasn't caught a touchdown pass since his rookie season. He's only got the 1.
Yeah.
It's just, I mean, to your point about him being the best one, it was just an afterthought. It's just a throwaway question this week to Brian Callahan about, hey, Traylon, anything there? And they're like, yeah, we shut him down for the year weeks ago. Nobody cared to really probe or pry on that, just because there's nothing of consequence that he brought. And I know that my credibility when it comes to Nick Westbrook-Akina is maybe not the best, but it's getting better by the week, damn you. And I get so frustrated at the mistakes made from this coaching staff at large, like that, where I get you don't directly have hands on personnel, and that first round talent will always get additional opportunities. I was on board with the idea of trying to turn Traylon into something salvageable.
Yeah.
His body letting him down again is not the end of the world, but there's plays on the field that he just doesn't make.
And it was happening at practice too. That's the thing.
More often than not, I can trust Nick Westbrook-Akina to make that. And that they relegated this man to 5th on the depth chart just because, I can fix him, as is, usually the case in NFL coaching. I can fix him. Sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
Sometimes what's on tape is what they are. And that is a player who's wildly inconsistent, even when he's available, and has been robbed of the ability to develop because his body keeps letting him down.
Yeah, I think that's why we found out so late about his ACL issue, because I bet Brian Callen's like, man, I really talked up Traylon Burks. Let's just forget about it. And that's a joke, but it's just like, let's push it out of the way. Let's focus on the players that are here. And, a couple of weeks ago, he got his ACL surgery, and I forgot to tell everybody.
What?
But don't remember that I said that he's going to be a really great wide receiver and that he's really having a great offseason and great camp and all this kind of stuff.
Well, Ridley said something like he's the most talented wide receiver who's ever been around or something like that.
And there was just a lot of positivity. Oh, my God. And you just look back on it and you're just like, this staff, I think, overestimated the players. But I also think they overestimated their own ability to get the most out of the players quickly. And I think what you're seeing, like the Will Levis you're seeing now is what they expected to see week 1. And so now he is 7 weeks behind, 8 weeks behind, including the injury from his development, which is fine if he continues to develop. It's just like everything just took a lot longer than what we initially thought it would. And what they initially thought it would too.
Yeah, and mixing in, just the slightest bit of disaster at any given moment in ways that you couldn't write this shit.
No. Oh my God. It is wild.
This season, which has been, I guess, mildly entertaining, but oof. So the Jags game, they need to win this game because I will have zero confidence in them as a coaching staff if they lose to the 2-win Jacksonvilles of the world that, like you said, are just biding their time until they can show Doug Peterson politely the door and send him off with his visor to go play golf somewhere in Jacksonville with Malarkey. And for Brian Callahan, man, I mean, just some of the comments in the postgame, not just the players, right? Because the players, obviously, I was just mind blown by some of the shit being said in the locker room on Sunday night. But
it's so bad.
Oh, God almighty.
Maybe Vrabel's way of handling players in the press was probably the best way.
Not everybody needs to know how you're feeling at all times. Right. Just that doesn't help. I appreciate Jarvis's transparency. I'm sure many of my media colleagues would tell me to shut the hell up because what is wrong with you? You're somebody who works in the quotes business. Whoa, that one sent my head spinning. The point being with that, though, Brian Callahan getting up at the podium after they got pants 42-19 in Washington and saying something to the effect of, I'm disappointed in myself, almost like he let his guard down a little bit. I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into some of the comments because they're 3-9 and everybody reads too much into everything at 3-9. But I really need to see them beat Jacksonville just the same way that they needed to beat the Patriots because they're worse than you. Just do it.
Got to do it. And you got to do it in a more convincing manner than what you did against the Patriots because the Jaguars, by all of the metrics, when you look at the data, worst defense. This is the easiest defense that the Tennessee Titans offense as a whole will face and Will Levis will face. There's no reason. And look, I went bold on my prediction, 28-7. But and I know it's a division game and crazy things happen in the division game, but you as a team need a blowout win. You haven't had a blowout win. You've had plenty of blowout losses. It's going to be at home in front of a mediocre home crowd that's not going to be interested.
It's supposed to be a nice day. Come say hi. I'll be out there.
Yeah. I just look at it and I go, you have to win big. Because if you lose, like we said at the top of this show and on cover 2, is I don't know what's going to happen. At some point, I know that she's really good friends with Sheila Ford Hamp, and they went through a really rough patch up in Detroit. But this is a losing to this team in this iteration of a team with a lame duck head coach that is getting fired at the end of the year. You have to win this game. There's the Bengals game, whatever. You have to win this one. You're at home. You have to win these division games because first off, the only way to build a winning culture is to win games. And you need to provide some hope. If you go 5-1 or even 4-2 against the division the rest of the way, that is huge to build confidence in what you're doing is working and what you're doing could work next year. Because at the end of the day, the Texans look very human. They're not as immortal as what we thought they were going to be at the beginning of the year. And the Jaguars obviously are heading for another different kind of tailspin. The Colts, who knows what Anthony Richardson is going to be at any given moment. This whole thing is still wide open. Well, not maybe wide open, but still open for next year for the Tennessee Titans to have a player acquisition cycle and change everything about what this season was. But you have to put some wins together. You can't go and not win any of these games the rest of the way. You have to start stacking some wins the players need it and the staff needs it more importantly.
Honest to God, I mean, if they just stop doing shit like getting 12 penalties in a game,
Right.
11 penalties and a half, and you can debate, some of the calls, I know for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it is. You don't give yourself the benefit of the doubt. There is zero margin for error for this football
Right.
team.
You're not the Ravens, right? The Ravens have the most penalties in the NFL by a wide margin, but it doesn't matter because they score points.
Yes.
They can't stop anybody on defense, but they sure as hell can score points. And this is a defense in Jacksonville that you should be able to put some points up in.
Yeah, I mean, the only advantage that I could see is I like their 2 pass rushers better than I like the Titans' 2 pass rushers. But that's about it right now. All right, that's Zach Lyons, cover 2 from 1 to 3 weekdays. Football and Other F Words live on the 104.5 The Zone YouTube channel at night, and the Stacking the Inbox Substack that you can check out all the musings of said Zach Lyons as he endeavors to be the hardest working man in local sports media. Thank you, buddy.
No problem.